My name is Matthew Sturkey, Vice President of Sales and Marketing with Stone Mill Log and Timber Homes. Just a couple of housekeeping items. If you would keep muted throughout the presentation, I promise you'll have an opportunity to ask questions along the way. I'll stick around as long as I need to answer all the questions that you have. And as I said a minute ago, you'll have an opportunity to follow up with your sales consultant or them to follow up with you. If you have additional questions, that they can't answer, they can always come to me as well. With that said, we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. Just a little bit of history about our company and about me and some of the goals for today in this presentation. We are a family-owned and operated business since 1974. We're second generation family-owned and operated. We specialize in the design, fabrication, construction of log and timber frame homes. That's pretty much all we do. We don't do any conventional homes. It's all log and timber frame. We help prospective clients that are looking to retire and relocate to mountainous and lake communities, to equestrian communities, looking to build second homes, forever homes, investment properties, rentals, you name it, everything in between. Like I said, we have been in business. This is our 47th year. We've done a little over 2,000 log and timber frame homes in our existence. I've been working in the business since 1997 officially. Did a lot of things before I started working here, like work out on the road, in summer jobs and down at the plant. But one of the things that is pertinent to today, about 4 or 5 years ago, I got my real estate license to help stone mill prospective clients in their quest to find land. And so that was something I wanted to mention because I speak today from a standpoint of a real estate agent too, that specializes in helping prospective clients find land and what to look for. And there is a trick to it to some degree. Not everybody specializes in land sales or acquisitions or listings. A lot of real estate agents will kind of do a little bit of both, or some won't even touch land because it involves a lot of work, and sometimes your land transactions aren't quite what you would find in the sale of a home. So I say that to talk from a standpoint of that's going to be our main focus for today. And the goals for today are going to be to try to educate you on what things to look for. What are you looking for when you're out there in that quest to find land? And for most of our prospective clients, they're caught up in the emotional portion of it. They're caught up in the subjective portion. How good is the view? Where is it located? Does it have a pond on it? Does it have a creek? How much acreage is it? What am I going to be doing on that property when I actually purchase it? Am I going to be riding horses or riding four-wheelers, or am I going to be sitting on my front porch, drinking sweet tea, watching the sunset? Whatever that may be, whatever that piece of property looks like for you, those are very emotional things that you start looking for in the property and in the land. And what I'm going to talk today about is more of the objective items, things that you're going to be looking out for, things that you want to take into consideration before purchasing it, things that you want to pay close attention to before you actually close on it. And so we're going to start with some of the tips about what to do before you start looking for land. And the first one is to develop a budget, just like we talk about in other lunch and learns. And let me make a comment real quick. Don't feel like you have to write any of this down. We are going to send this presentation out to everyone. We're going to send all the handouts that we use to everyone so that you don't have to sit there and write. You're welcome to eat your lunch, drink your coffee, and listen, and not have to sit there and write down what we're saying. So I wanted to mention that. But just like with building a home, a log or a timber frame home, we're always going to say in the quest for finding land, we're always going to say, get a budget together. not only just a budget for the property, but also a budget for what you might have left over to improve that property. Because sometimes prospective clients forget about the improvements. If you're looking at a piece of undeveloped land, you've got to get a driveway in, you've got to get power to the building site, you've got to get water, or you've got to do a well, or you've got to do a sewer to the site, or you've got to put a septic system in. Those can be a pretty kind of unforeseen cost sometimes when you're just looking at a piece of property that doesn't have the infrastructure in it. So make sure when I'm working with a prospective client, I will ask them, hey, what's the land budget? What's the improvement to the land budget? So I have a total number so that when we go out and start looking for properties, we're looking at properties that fit within that budget goal. If your budget for land and land improvements is 100K, and I'm just picking random numbers today, we don't want to go look at a $200,000 piece of property that's unimproved, that's undeveloped, that you've got to put $50,000 worth of improvements into. We want to look at properties that are going to fit within that range. We even want to look at properties that are going to fit within that range with your improvements, because depending on the site, you can get into a higher cost for improvements depending on the slope of the property. And we'll come back to that as we get into our presentation. The second thing that we're going to talk about is defining a specific geographic area for that quest for finding property, especially in this part of the country. We get a lot of empty nesters, retirees that relocate to East Tennessee, and they say, you know, we want to be in East Tennessee or Western North Carolina. Well, one, that's a humongous geographic range, even though it doesn't look like it on a map. But to find property in that area with all that we have to offer here, with lake communities, mountain communities, farm, equestrian, that is a large geographic area. When I talk about being more defined, I'm talking about specifying a specific location. Like, I want to be in the Townsend Wallen area, I want to be in Crossville area, or I want to be north of Knoxville in the East Tennessee area. Better define a geographic location, and I promise you that search will be easier. And I know sometimes you start off from a blank canvas and you really just don't know, but what I would suggest is, for those of you who don't own property that are in that search right now, find an area that you like. You know, do you like Blount County, or do you want to be in Sevier County? A lot of our clients want to be near the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. They want to be near Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge and Sevierville. So we start that search over closer to that area. Or if I've got an investor that's looking for land and they want to be close enough to Dollywood, or they want to be close enough to Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg, we're certainly not going to look at property that's 50 miles away. That's not the location that they're after. So if you can, better define that location that you want to be in, because you can really start to concentrate your efforts and really hone in on that specific location to find that land. And then the last tip is, if you're not experienced with it, I would certainly advise you to seek out a professional that specializes in land or who has experience, like myself or like Dawn. Dawn does land acquisitions as well and land sales as well. But there are specific real estate firms like Whitetail Properties, for example, that specialize in land, National Land Realty. This is not to say anything against real estate agents that do home sales. It's just not their specialization. And companies that specialize in land are going to know what land is out there. They're going to know what you're looking for and what to find that fits and is in line with what you're looking for. And they're going to be doing that every single day. You know, if you needed some plumbing work, you're not going to call an electrician. So it's the same kind of mentality. Seek out a professional that specializes in that specific area to find the land, because they're going to be looking at, when I'm helping a prospective client, I'm looking at the big picture. I'm looking at, what do they want to build on the property? What kind of floor plan? What square footage? What's their total investment goal? What are their desires for the property long term? How are they going to be using the property? I'm not just looking at it as a piece of dirt, you know, ready to get you in it and move on. And you want somebody that's going to be looking at the big picture. So seek out a professional whenever possible. All right, so objectively, not emotionally, objectively, what are some things that you're looking for before you purchase property? I've got these listed kind of in bullet point. Certainly the first one is location and zoning. Location is certainly everything. This week working with an investor that is looking for an investment piece of property. So they're going to want to be as close to Dollywood, and they're going to want to be as close to Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg, whereas we get a lot of our clients that are retirees. They want to get away from the city. They want to be in an area that's a good, nice, simple retirement community to where they can just relax, in the next, several decades. And so look at the location that you're going in. And then when I talk about zoning, make sure you know what that property that you're looking at is zoned for. This is more important for investors, because if you're an investor and you're looking at taking a 50-acre tract and you're looking at chopping it up into multiple sites, agriculture has restrictions, and certain counties have restrictions on how many sites you can put in. Like, for example, we saw and looked at a piece of property in Townsend area this week. It was zoned agriculture. You couldn't split it up into less than 5-acre tracts versus another tract that was in Sevierville that was zoned residential, and it had some critical slope, which means it had really steep topography, and they were limited to one site for every 2 acres. Now, for most of you, you're not investors. You're basically building a forever home, or you're building that weekend retreat. You're not typically going to have this issue, but for anybody that's looking at an investment, something definitely to consider is how it's zoned, and can you get it rezoned? But that's not typically an issue with most of our clients, because they're looking at building a residence in a piece of property, or on a piece of property that's normally zoned residential or agricultural, and you don't have those restrictions when you're just building one residence, for a legacy home, or for a weekend getaway, or for a primary residence. So that's the first item. Second item, which is really important, and this is looking at the big picture, is topography, the soil type, and percolation and buildability. I don't know if buildability is a word. I made it up. If it is, great. But topography is talking about the natural landscape and the slope. And I'm talking more specifically about properties that are gentle to moderate to steep slope. In this area, we see a lot of steep properties. If you're wanting to build a 1-story, 1-level rancher because, my knees are giving out, or my hips are giving out, and I don't want to navigate stairs in my design, you need to be looking for a piece of property that's suitable for that floor plan. If you're trying to build a real big sprawling 1-level like the Cottonwood on a really steep site, I can tell you right now, that's not the best fit. So I'm not saying that you necessarily have to pick a piece of property to fit your plan, but it's nice to know what direction you're going. It's nice to know that if you are wanting to build that longer 1-level, that 1-story, so that you don't have to navigate stairs, then I'm typically not going to help a prospective client find a real steep piece of property. I'm not going to be looking at that. I'm going to be looking for level to moderately sloped sites that fit that design, that fit what you're trying to achieve, so that you don't have to navigate those stairs with basements or upper levels. So that talks about slope. Percolation is about soil type. And what this comes down to is making sure before you purchase a piece of property that it perks for the number of bedrooms that you want to be able to build. For example, if I want to build a 4-bedroom home and I'm looking at a piece of property that only perks for 2 bedrooms, that's not the piece of property that I need. That's not the piece of property that I'm going to move forward with. I need a piece of property that has the soil, that has the percolation to accommodate the number of bedrooms that I want to build. Most of the sites around here, but you can find those sites with rocky soil where they don't perk as well, they don't absorb, the wastewater as well, and you can't get them to perk for the number of bedrooms that you want. And I've got a little handout. Hopefully this works, that I'll show everybody on a basically a septic permit for a septic system. This is a piece of property that was proposed for a 3-bedroom house. It perked for a 3-bedroom house, which was good, meaning it had the soil absorption to accommodate a house with 3 bedrooms. And you can see what the environmental or health environmental is typically looking for, what they're typically going to put together to show that septic system. This is the proposed house site, the location of the septic tank, and then this is what we call the drain field location. So when you're going through the process and the quest for finding land, just make sure that that property will perk for the number of bedrooms that you want to build. It's really important. All right, next item is building feasibility. And we could probably talk about this for another hour, but I'll spare you. Building feasibility is doing due diligence or the feasibility of, is this property going to be suitable for the plan that I want to build and for the budget goal that I have in mind? And so if you're looking at a piece of property that's got a really steep slope and you have a certain budget goal that you really want to hit and you really don't want to sacrifice that, and you find a piece of property that's really steep and you're going to end up with a lot of cost associated with getting a driveway in and getting water back to the building site and getting power back to the building site, and then you're going to end up with a lot of foundation cost, you may want to keep looking for a more suitable, more build-friendly piece of property, because that building site could eat up a lot of that budget because of the topography and because it's not as build-friendly. And the other thing too is you got to take into account that infrastructure cost. And that's the reason I said, make sure you have a land and land improvement budget, because you don't want to miss the feasibility of the cost associated with getting that driveway in, getting the power to the building site. It's one thing to have water and power at the road, but if you're looking at a 26-acre tract and you've got to go 2,000 feet with a driveway, and you got to go 2,000 feet to get power back there and to get water back there, that's some cost that you've got to account for in that budget goal, so that you make sure that you have the money for it. So building feasibility, when we are helping prospective clients look at land, we're looking at, hey, is this site, is this property, is this acreage suitable for what this homeowner wants to do? And does that fit, and is it fall in line with what they're after? Next item is developed versus undeveloped land. And this is something that we run into a lot with clients. Developed land is what you're finding in some of these subdivisions, some of these communities with these HOAs, where you've got infrastructure already in, you got roads already cut in, paved. You find that a lot here in the mountainous communities and some of these lake communities where they've got a gated community. They've already got water in there, and they've already got power, and they've already got a building site cleared out, and it's pretty close to build ready. Whereas a lot of our clients are getting away from that. They want a 30-acre parcel. They want privacy. They want serenity and quietness. They don't want to be on top of their neighbor. And so they're looking at an undeveloped piece of land where they're going to have to not only purchase the land, but they're going to have to get infrastructure in there and get that driveway in and get that power back there and get that septic system put in, or that sewer back there, and or get water back there, and or drill a well. And so you want to make sure that you know what utilities are on that property, so that you know what you've got left to do. And there are some areas where you'll have power there, you'll have a road there, you got to cut a driveway in, you've got water there, but it's on a private sewage system. It's not a public sewer. My apologies. So you want to account for that. You want to make sure that you know that, hey, there is a septic system required here. This is not on city sewer. I'm going to have the cost associated with getting that septic system in when we go to build, this home. And so that's what the difference between developed and undeveloped land is. Your developed land a lot of times has a lot of that or some of that infrastructure already in. And ultimately you pay for that. That's a lot of the times the reason that undeveloped land will tend to be less expensive than developed land, because the developer is charging for that infrastructure along, with that sale price. This also ties into the next item, which is permits, covenants and restrictions, and easements. When you go through the purchase and sale agreement for a lot or land transaction, and I've got a copy of just a very generic real estate lot and land purchase and sale agreement that I'm going to show you. When you go through that process, there are certain things in place that we typically will want our clients to do some due diligence on, and that we'll typically do due diligence on when we go through that. And they're really called contingencies. And when we look at this purchase and sale agreement, you'll see some of these things on here, like building permits. When you're going and looking at a piece of property, you want to know essentially what permits you've got to gather. I've got to get a building permit. What covenants and restrictions you have in the development. Now, if it's undeveloped land, you're typically not going to have what we call a CNRs, a covenants and restrictions. You may have some restrictions that are associated with that deed, like you can't put a mobile home on the property or you can't raise livestock. When you get into some of these developed properties, they have what we call an HOA. They have a CNR, which is a covenant and restriction document that you want to make sure that you read before you purchase the land, so that you know what restrictions are in that development. Some developments are very restrictive and some are a little bit more lenient. There are some developments that require certain minimum square footages. There are some developments that require you to disclose everything that you're going to be doing in the house. And they have an architectural review committee, which is an ARC, and they want to see the plans before you build, before you break ground. They want to approve it, and it doesn't matter what you say. They want to be involved in the process to see what you're building. And a lot of our clients want to get away from that, but just make sure you're aware of that when you're finding land, so that you know what restrictions and what covenants are in there. If you want to build a 1,500 square foot house and you go find land in a development that requires 1,800 square feet minimum, you're not going to be able to build what you want. You're going to have to build something bigger than what you want. So that's CNRs. And then easements. I've got a client in town this week. We've been looking at property the last couple of days, and this property that he made an offer on has an easement with a piece. It's a 26-acre tract. There's a little 5-acre parcel that's cut out in the center of it, and they have a shared easement for about 1,500 feet, and then it splits off onto the 26 acres. Make sure you understand those easements and who's responsible for what. If there is a shared easement, is it a joint easement? Do we share the cost in maintaining that, or in any improvements to that? So just make sure you understand what that easement associated with that property is. Some prospective clients don't want easements. They don't want to share a driveway for a portion of the drive with somebody else. So if that's not something that you want, make sure you know that going in, if there is an easement associated with that deed or with that parcel that you're looking at. All right, I know we're going fast. It's 12:27. There's a ton of information to unpack here, but stay with me. I promise we'll be able to answer all your questions if you have any at the end. The next item is a survey, and I've got another handout that I wanted to show everybody with regards to survey. Everybody's familiar with a survey, and I'm really big on this when I'm helping a prospective client, because If I can't see property lines, if I can't visibly see where that property line is, if it's not staked, or if it's not pinned, or if it's not ribboned, or if I can't see the live oak tree that is the back corner of the lot, or the fence line, or the creek line, I want to be able to help my client locate and determine exactly where that property line is. And I'll give you a good example. I helped a client a couple of years ago, and the seller had not done a survey, and we got on the property. He liked it, and we made an offer on the property contingent on a survey, because I was like, okay, I really want to just see property lines. I want to verify where everything is. Well, lo and behold, the property line happened to be on the other side of the seller's driveway, which meant that the driveway that the seller thought was on their property was actually on the property that they were selling. And she had accepted the offer contingent on a survey, which meant that that buyer now took ownership of that driveway that she thought was on her property. The buyer was kind enough to work out a deal where it was a shared easement for a period, or a particular portion of the driveway. And then she had her own driveway past that point, and then he would break off from that point to bring his driveway up to his building site. The point of all this is make sure, don't just take somebody's word for it. Don't take somebody saying, oh, well, we think the property line's here, or it's at that boundary. Get a survey if one has not already been done, and make sure you can visibly see where the property lines are. The other important thing to that, especially when you get into smaller tracts. Now, when you're in a 40 or 26 acre tract, it's probably not much of an issue, because you've got plenty of room to put a house. But when you're talking about a 1 acre tract in a development, and you've got setbacks, 20-foot setbacks in the front, 15 or 10-foot setbacks on the sides, but yet you're on the top of a mountain, and the only building site on that acre tract is right at the top, you better know where your property lines are, because you may want to put a house that's within the setback, and you can't do that. The setbacks are basically distances that you have to abide by, county regulations, development regulations that you have to abide by, where you can't put your structure inside of. So that acre lot that might be an acre with this beautiful mountain view may only have a third of an acre or half of an acre of a building site. And you're trying to build this 3,000 or 3,500 or 4,000 square foot house, that could get tight. So just make sure you know where the property lines are before you actually proceed forward. So hope that's helpful there. All right, and then the last item, which is certainly something that we've covered, but I'll go back over it one more time. Build site location and the improvements. We've got this 26 acre tract. You love it. It gives you everything that you want. It's got some woods, some pasture, but where you want to put the building site is 2,000 feet from the road. And you've got to get power from the road, and you've got to get water from the road, and you've got to get a driveway. You want to make sure you do your due diligence before you start investing in that property or making an offer, if time allows for it, to be able to start doing some just due diligence and some legwork and some homework to see, okay, what kind of infrastructure cost am I going to get into? How much is it going to cost me to get water back to where I want to put the house, or to get power back there, or to do a driveway? Am I going to have 20,000, 25,000, or am I going to have 50,000? You want to know that, because that may play a part in that total budget. A lot of times when we're helping prospective clients, we're looking at the total investment goal, which if it's X, you've got 3 different criteria. You've got the cost of the land, the cost of the improvements to land, and the cost of the house. Typically, your construction cost is not including the improvement cost, because that's going to be there no matter what you build, whether it's a log or timber frame home, or whether it's a mobile home. You're still going to have the infrastructure and the improvement cost. So hopefully that makes some sense, and something that you definitely do your due diligence. Back to that purchase and sale agreement. Hang on just a second. My apologies. I just clicked the wrong thing. So going back to this purchase and sale agreement, when you look at this one, for example, and this is basically the Tennessee Realtor's copy, and starting with section 6, it talks about inspections and contingencies. These are certain things that your professional real estate agent can walk through with you before you actually make an offer and say, hey, we can make an offer on this property contingent on a feasibility study. Well, what the heck does that mean? Well, that means I need to do some legwork. I need to see if this is feasible to build what I want to build on this property before we proceed forward. So you can make an offer that's contingent on it being feasible to build what you want to build. And you have a certain number of days that you input into the contract so that you can do some of that legwork. And if in that period of time you find that, oh my gosh, this, I'm wanting to build a house that's going to cost $400,000, and this property, it's going to cost me $100,000 to put a driveway in. It's not feasible for me to buy this piece of property and build what I want to build. So that's a contingency that helps you, move out of that contract if need be. Building permits. You want to make sure that, hey, can I get a building permit? Is the county going to issue a building permit? What kind of obstacles am I going to have? Typically, it's not much anything. Or what's the cost going to be of this building permit? East Tennessee is very different than North Carolina. North Carolina is very different than California, and what it costs for those building permits and some of those fees, some of those impact fees associated with building on a particular site. This is a big one. My offer is contingent on permitting for a septic system. I want to make sure that this property will perk. I want to pay to have a soil test done to see what the soil type is, to see what the absorption rate is, to see how many bedrooms I can get. And if this property does not perk for the number of bedrooms that I want to build this big legacy home with 5 bedrooms, and I can only get this thing perked for 3, that's probably not the best piece of property for what you're looking to do. And so it's going to be contingent on getting that perk test done for the number of bedrooms that you want. Rezoning, if you're buying something that's zoned residential and you want it to be rezoned ag, or if vice versa, you want it's agriculture, you need to be rezoned residential so that you can put more lots, more parcels on that larger tract. Making sure that they will allow you to rezone it. Some of these counties will create restrictions, and they'll change some of those requirements year after year so that they prevent people from coming in and buying a 50-acre tract and putting 60 sites on it or 70 sites on it. They don't want that. They're trying to discourage that. So it varies from county to county. Most of you, if in fact probably 99% of you on this virtual lunch and learn today, are not going to have that issue, because you're probably wanting to build one residence, one home. It's usually not an issue. It's more for your investors. Well test. This is something that if you don't have city water or water at the road, you can do some, test digs if you need to, but generally water and finding a water table is not going to be an issue. But, obviously those are things that you can start doing some due diligence on as well. And then any other contingencies that you might want to put in there. This property, this client this week, we made an offer contingent on first right of refusal, and the seller accepted it, and they had a period of time of 10 days to get down here to see it, to determine if they wanted to proceed forward with it. They came down, they loved it. We're proceeding forward. So there's other contingencies that your professional real estate agent can help you with, through that transaction process. So if it's not something you have experience in, I'd recommend, seeking out a professional for sure. All right. And then we really just kind of covered some of those contingencies and stipulations with regards to feasibility, permits, rezoning. I will talk about a couple of other ones. There is a financial contingency. If you're going to be financing the purchase of the land, you can make transaction contingent on you being able to get a certain amount of financing. Like I need to get 80% financing. I'm going to put 20% down, but I need to get 80% financing. Or I need this property to appraise for what I'm buying it for or greater than what I'm buying it for. And if you're financing, sometimes banks are looking for that appraisal to check out. Otherwise, they're going to ask you to come up with more money to put into the down payment. If you're not financing, you're paying cash, then the appraisal may just be a peace of mind thing. You want to make sure that what you're investing in is a good investment, and that what you're buying is valued at what you're actually paying for it, because making sure you understand tax appraisal and market appraisal are very different. Your tax appraisal, it's really in essence ideal for your tax appraisal to be low, so you're paying less taxes on it, but your market appraisal will be high based on the value of the property, the market value of the property. So that takes care of financial and appraisal contingencies. And then certainly insurability. That's a normal one. You want to make sure you'll be able to get insurance on it. And that goes hand in hand with the next one, which is any type of flood certification. There are a lot of times there's a tract that we're looking at this week. It's 50 acres. It's up in Townsend, and there is a portion of it that's in a floodplain from a creek that's on the property. And you want to make sure that you're not going to have any issues with getting insurance with a property that's got a floodplain. Or if you're buying a piece of property in a lake community, you want to make sure you know where the flood line is, and make sure that your building site has enough room there for you to put the house that you want to put on it outside of that flood line. So we talked about survey, we talked about insurability, and we talked about those other ones as well. And I did share along the way, we will share this lot and land purchase and sale agreement as a handout. It is, again, a generic, it doesn't have any information in it except for just the boilerplate template. But you can go online and you can type in lot and land purchase and sale agreements. They will vary somewhat from state to state. So again, use this just only for a resource as well. Okay. Let me double check real quick to make sure I covered everything. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention, and I think this goes into the closing, and we'll go to our next slide and kind of the final remarks. The first one is, I'm not big on purchasing land sight unseen. Some people will do it from a real estate agent doing a video for them, or from doing a FaceTime, or from them just doing their own research. I really am an advocate for the owner getting their feet on the ground, walking the property, and knowing exactly what they're getting into, what the surrounding is, what the properties are around the parcel that you're looking to buy, what the community's like. Going into town, we had this client in this week that we were showing property to, and we wanted to go in town and see what the downtown looks like. Where are they going to be living for the next 20 years of their life, or the next 30 or 40 years of their life, and what that community is like, and is that going to be a good fit for them? So it's really good for you to get on the property. Yes, you can make offers with first right of refusal where you haven't seen it, and if the seller's amenable to that, you can do things like that where you can make an offer where you haven't seen it, and then you can actually get out on the property. But I really would encourage you, don't buy a property sight unseen unless you've just got people bird dogging it for you that you trust, and that you're comfortable with making a decision like that. The second thing is it's always good, if you're just doing due diligence and doing your homework, to pull up this property, from Google Earth, from a satellite view, and just look at the surrounding area. And I did that for everybody to see, what's the surrounding area? Do I have a landfill or a quarry? Or do I have, we were looking at a tract, I'm not going to say where it was, but we found out that it was about a half a mile down the road from a racetrack. I don't think that many people want to be listening to that every weekend, Friday and Saturday night, when they're trying to build this peaceful forever home and having to listen to a racetrack every Friday and Saturday night. Probably not what you're going for. And unless you're doing some due diligence and doing your homework, you might miss that, because you might go see the property on a Monday when the racetrack's not open. And then you come to find, when you're sitting there on your front porch, that there's a racetrack a half a mile down the road. So do that due diligence, do your homework, do your legwork, and use things like, Google Earth to see what's in the surrounding area. I mean, you can see what is out there, anything that might be adverse, landfills or any sinkholes or anything like that. So it's just all about doing your legwork, doing your homework. And I say that because buying land and building a home can be a very emotional thing. It's exciting. It's something that you've always dreamed of. I want that beautiful log home on that lake property, or on that mountain property, or on that farm that I've always wanted. So you can get caught up in the emotion of that, and you can get undisciplined, I guess. So be vigilant about looking at that stuff and researching the area for any adverse facts that you might find. Like I said, floodplains or landfills or nuisances, like racetracks. And then in closing, just do your due diligence. And if you're not experienced enough and you're not comfortable, seek out that professional, somebody that understands what to look for and how to help you, and companies that might specialize in looking for property and what things to look for. So that's it. I know we've probably gone a little longer than we had intended to, and I hope this has been helpful, but we're going to go ahead and open the floor to any final questions and answers. And like I said, if you have any questions and you can't stick around for another 15 or 20 minutes, feel free to shoot them to your sales consultant, or send them to Dawn. She can send them to me. I'm happy to answer any questions for you along the way.
Okay, Matthew, I have a couple questions. So let me pull up this question here. We have a question that says, does the elevation make a significant difference regarding winter low temps?
Winter low temps?
Yep. So I'm thinking, with the elevation and it being colder, is there going to be, should they think of anything else as far as planning?
That's a great question, because building a house at a 4,000 foot, 5,000 foot, 6,000 foot altitude is going to be different than building a house in the valley at 1,500 feet. There's going to be wind speed requirements that you have to account for. There's going to be certain things in construction, like capillary tubes in the glass, so that the glass can breathe when you get into those higher elevations. We build log and timber structures all over the country. So we may go 1 month into Colorado at 7,000 feet, and then the next month be in North Carolina at 4,000 feet. And it's very different than building in the valley or out on a piece of farm property that's at 1,500 feet in altitude, with snow loads, wind speeds, seismic requirements, climate zone. You get changing in climate zones, and what climate zones dictate is the energy performance of a house. And the country has different climate zones, climate zone 1 through 6, for example. And the higher you go, the more stringent it is, the thicker the log walls you need to put in, or the more insulation you have to put in, and it has an effect. So be cognizant of that when you're looking at property in East Tennessee, and you're looking in these mountainous communities. What kind of building code requirements are going to be needed in this property versus something that's a little bit farther down the mountain. And that gets very tricky sometimes when you're looking at coastal pieces of property and you're getting into wind speed zones. If you're looking in a coastal area and you're not right there on the ocean, you still may have high wind speed design requirements. Like down in Florida, you have to get out past I-10 to get outside that coastal high wind speed zone. And even then, you still have some higher wind speed requirements. So just make sure you understand what building permit, building requirements, and that's what we were talking about, building permits, what requirements are associated with those building permits, what wind speeds and snow loads, et cetera. So hopefully that answers that question. Maybe a thumbs up or a thumbs down, if not.
And we have another question about after setting the budget, what comes next, the floor plan or the site?
That's a good question. I would say both, somewhat simultaneous. And what I mean by that, in essence, is I wouldn't get too locked in on a floor plan before you have a piece of property. You really want to try to design the home to the property that you find, because not every design is going to be suitable for every piece of property. You may have this beautiful mountain view out of the back of the house, and you may need to tweak the design a little bit to take advantage of that view. Or you may need to reposition because of the size of the lot. And let's say you want to build a cottonwood, which is 96 feet long by 42 feet deep. And you find this beautiful, 3/4 of an acre lot in this lake development, and it's got the right topography, but you've got a 15 to 20 foot setback on the sides. And this 96-foot footprint won't fit within that lot. So you might have to tweak the design a little bit, bring it in some, or go to a different design like the Teleco, or something a little narrower that's a little bit smaller footprint. So I wouldn't get too locked in on the design. I might say, it's okay to pick a plan to see what, plan you're kind of leaning towards. Like, I want to build a long one level so that when you're going out and looking at property, you can tell your real estate professional, hey, this is the plan I want to build. I need to find something that's going to suit this. I need to find a piece of property that's big enough, that has the topography and the slope that's going to suit this design. But I just wouldn't get too locked in on a plan. I would maybe have a concept, go find the property, and then adjust the concept in the final plans to the lot that you picked, adding that beautiful, wall of glass to take advantage of that long range mountain view or that lake view or whatever it is.
Okay, and Matthew, when we talked about the perk test, we can't overbuild for what the property will perk for. But we have a question about someone has a perk for a 5-bedroom home, but they only want to build a 3-bedroom home. So that's
all good.
Yeah, you're good as long as you're not
good,
over.
Good to go. As long as you don't want to build 6 bedrooms, you are good to go. And typically your environmental and health departments are the ones who you would contact during due diligence or before you made an offer on a piece of property. You can actually call and get pay for a soil test to see, what that soil type is and what that property will perk for, so that that it's going to meet the requirements of what you're looking for. But yeah, if you've got a 5-bedroom perk or a septic permit, and you're only building a 3 or 4-bedroom home, you're good to go.
Okay, and this is a good question. I think Stacy asked this. She says, are you better off purchasing a tear down rather than undeveloped land so that it already has the infrastructure in place?
That's a really good question, Stacy. And when we look at property, we don't just look at lots and land. Sometimes we'll look for pre-existing structures that are dilapidated homes that are easy tear downs, or something with, let's say it has a double wide on it. Now you've got a structure that you can either live in during the time that you're building your home, or you can sell it and get somebody to come and take it off and clear it off and build your forever home on that piece of property. So that's a really good comment, because a lot of times and I'll give you, this is a good example. The property that our client made an accepted offer on this week, already had the driveway in. It already had power all the way to the building site. Water was all the way to the building site. And he had an RV that he was staying in the seller was staying in with the intent to live in the RV while he was building the house. And unfortunately, they just decided they wanted to stay in Texas and decided to sell the property. So the buyer actually not only got a great piece of property, but he got a great piece of property that had a driveway already in, compacted gravel driveway, already had water to the building site, already had power to the site, water was already there, and had a 3-bedroom septic system already in with a septic tank. So all the improvements are there. It's build ready. And that was very valuable. And part of the attraction to this piece of property is that all the infrastructure was there. And the buyer just said, hey, I don't want the RV. You can have the RV. He's going to pull it off the lot and he's build ready to build that home. So yeah, don't just look at lot and land. Look at, pre-existing structures that might be just complete tear downs. And that's a great way to find a piece of property that's already got infrastructure in. Not all the time, let me do qualify though, not all the time, especially if it's a little bit older, are those systems suitable. Your water typically will be, or well, driveway will be, power will be, but your septic systems will need, I would highly recommend an inspection of that septic system. Because not always will that be suitable for any type of home that you're putting on there. Dawn, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that, and I've had cases where maybe there's an old structure, and some of the, let's say the electrical's already ran and already has an old septic system, and maybe you just have to add on to it and you can tear the structure down. The cost of demo sometimes is not as expensive as what you think it's going to be. I had one down in Friendsville, and the demo is only going to cost $12,000. There was already a driveway, there was already electrical, there's already septic. They could even reuse the foundation from that previous home. So, sometimes I would be open-minded, because when you start to look at undeveloped land, I agree. When you're starting with a blank slate, you're having to take the burden of all the cost just to get that land ready to start.
Yeah, and a lot of times, general contractors, if you're hiring a GC to build your home, as long as you're clear with them that you want them to handle that improvement, to get the driveway in, to get the septic system in, to get the water dug and run all the way to the building site and the power there, they can put that in their scope. They can even price it out separately so you know what the improvement cost is. So you're not really stuck necessarily on your own to try to figure it out. It's just not something you got to take into account when you're looking at the price of different pieces of land. Some are going to have improvements made and some are not. And you have to take that into account when you're looking at the price points between the two and you're making comparisons.
Yeah.
Like again, perfect example. We looked at 2 pieces of property on Wednesday, the one he made an offer on, which had all the improvements in, and another one right down the road, which was basically less acreage, had no improvements, and it was basically the same price. And it was a no-brainer. It's like, unless that property was significantly better in emotional value, or had significantly better view, there's really no justification in that when they're the same price and one has all the infrastructure and the other one doesn't.
I know, I agree. We also have a question, Matthew. Diane has sent me a message, and she's asking about what happens if you purchase land and the water table becomes a problem due to overbuilding. And what she's talking about is like in a development where maybe a developer bought a huge parcel of land and they've, separated it out into smaller lots and kind of overdeveloped the land. How can you avoid this?
Yeah, that's a great question, and really my answer is going to be a little vague because I'm not quite experienced enough in hearing or learning or seeing situations where that has happened. So I don't really know the answer to what do you do? I know I have run into situations before where when you drill a well, your typical yield for water is usually about 3 gallons per minute minimum. And when you find an area that has that low of a yield, that's kind of a red flag that you need to be careful of, because what that means is there's not much water in that water table, and that water table is going to take care of multiple lots in a development. So I have seen situations where water's run out of a table. It's not as common, it's not super common, but you tend to want to, the ideal situation is to be in an area where the water yield is about 5 plus, 6 or 7 plus. I mean, anything above 5 is acceptable. 3 is the minimum requirement, and that's, to me, that is too low. So you can start doing a little bit of due diligence on the front end to learn more about the area. Maybe even call one of the neighbors. Hey, looking at this piece of property next to you, you're on a well. What's your yield, per gallon? And they might say, hey, it's at 10. Oh, that's good. That means there's plenty of water there. But I really, unfortunately, I don't know the answer to what you do in that situation, other than maybe re-drill a well and try to find a different water table. That's a great question. Stump the presenter. You win.
Well, and I think too.
Thankfully, I don't know the answer to that, because I just haven't seen that happen. I'm not saying it doesn't, but we just haven't seen it happen with our clients.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's there. I would say maybe that's something to research. Maybe call a professional well driller. Those types of people will certainly be the ones that will be better at answering that question. Because I would say that you're dead on. That could potentially happen. You get a development that's sucking the water out of a particular water table in that area, and it's overbuilt. And that's sometimes what these counties are trying to prevent, is they're restricting how many houses a developer can come in and put in a particular lot, especially with critical slope, and because you don't want to overburden those utilities and that infrastructure. And when I say utilities, I'm talking about water tables and things like that. So that's a great question, and I would say do some research on that. You can't always believe what you research online, but I think you probably would get some unbiased articles, documents that you can find. And then if you've got a well driller, if you've got a piece of property and you're concerned about that, ask the well driller that's going to be doing the well, what happens in that situation. Great question. Stump the presenter. We have a winner.
Okay, so I have a question from Jake. He has asked, how involved can stone mill be in the development process for completely raw land? And is there certain things that can only be done by the buyer? And secondly, can this development be rolled into the purchase price?
Great question. Before I answer that, I want to say it's 1 o'clock. I know that we're not done. For those of you who are at work and you've got an hour lunch break, or you're at home and you only dedicated an hour, I just want to thank you for joining us, being a part of this. We will send you the presentation. Dawn will send out a link to the video and to the audio where you can listen to it again if you want to go back and listen to some of the questions that get asked. And if all your questions don't get asked, please reach out to your sales consultant. They can help you. If they don't know the answer, they can seek me out or somebody else here in the office out to help you. You're also welcome to send me any questions directly, through Dawn. But thanks for your time. And if you need to go, or if you have to go, we understand at this point. If you want to stick around for some more Q&A, we'll go for about another 10 or 15 minutes. But great question. So the first part of that was what involvement or what level of involvement would Stone Mill have in the improvements? And Stone Mill, at its core, we are a company that designs, fabricates, and constructs log and timber frame structures, shell structures. So we do what we call a dried-in shell. If you happen to be building in this local area of East Tennessee around Knoxville, and you're within a 40 or 50-mile radius, we've got partnerships and contacts. In fact, we've got a company called Peloton Construction that is owned and operated by my partner, Rob Cantrell, who's the president of Stone Mill. He can talk to you about turnkey construction and about doing infrastructure and putting a road in and doing utilities and getting water in. But that would only be from a local area. If you're outside the local area, we're going to basically partner with you and help you go through the process of finding a local general contractor. So we wouldn't have any involvement in that whatsoever, other than helping walk you through it, helping you get through that process, either recommending or referring you to a partner builder that we've worked with in the past, that one of our other homeowners have worked with, or by helping you find somebody in that local area. So that's the answer to the first part, which is really we wouldn't be involved in putting the infrastructure in. We would help you either find a GC or refer you to a GC that could help you do that. That's somebody that's going to be local. It's going to be more cost effective. It's going to be more efficient. Honestly, if you're in Colorado or you're in Indiana and you're asking us to do infrastructure, it's not a good idea. You want somebody local to do that. You want a local GC to do that, or local subs who do those things. The second part is, yes, land purchase will typically, with some of the lending institutions that we work with and even other local lending institutions, can finance the land and then can roll that land and those land improvement costs into a permanent mortgage. And that is something that people do often. And so we have some lending institutions that we refer people to. One is US Bank. They're more of a regional kind of a Eastern US lending institution that has a log home division. Rural First, which is formerly Farm Credit Services, works a lot with our clients because they deal with larger tracts of land, like 10+ acre tracts, and they've got programs where you can finance the land and then roll it into a permanent loan and all your improvement costs as well. And then some of our homeowners decide to kind of pay as they go. They'll pay for the property and pay for the improvements, and then they'll finance the construction of the home through a construction loan. And then that way they've already got some equity in the property, or they've already got some equity in the improvements to the property. So it's a little different for every person, but yes, you can find lending institutions that will finance everything.
And Matthew, what should someone's budget be for land improvements, pre-purchase surveys, permits, etc.? What can they look at? Is there some kind of number that you can give them? It's a loaded question, I know.
Yeah, that's like the question we always get is, what's it cost to build? So that's like the $10 million question. That's another stump the presenter. Anytime you ask the cost per square foot question, you can always stump the presenter. But to give you an honest answer, the honest answer is one, I don't know, because it will vary with every piece of property. Every piece of property will have a different infrastructure cost. That's the reason when you're looking at property, you want to keep these things in mind. A really steep site that doesn't have great topography, that is a larger tract where you've got to get utilities and infrastructure 2,000 feet back, will carry a much different price tag than a 1 acre tract where you're building the house right in the middle, right up next to the road, and it's a nice level to moderately sloped property, and you've already got water down at the road, and you've already got power down at the road and sewer down at the road. That infrastructure cost is going to look very different. This is where I always hate, because we always seem to find ourselves putting ballpark numbers out there. And again, I would be careful if you go back and listen to any of my other presentations. When people ask about ballparks, I always get cringy when I have to do ballpark numbers on cost per square foot and things like that, because I just don't believe in them. I don't think it's the right way to go about doing due diligence. But sometimes people are like, hey, I just got to know where are we? You know, what kind of number are we looking at? And I would typically tell a prospective client, hey, if we're ballparking, you know, we're probably figuring somewhere around 25K to 50K for infrastructure. Again, and that is going to fluctuate dramatically either direction, depending on the site. So please don't hold me to that. Don't say, well, you told me 25 to 50K, because it will be dependent on the site and where you're putting the structure on the property and how much acreage it is. And that was a huge condition and consideration with the property that our client purchased this week. It was 26 acres. It was beautiful property, great topography, and it already had that infrastructure in. And yeah, it was a little bit more expensive than some other properties in the area that didn't have it. But I can tell you what, in the long run, he will save himself. He will save himself because it's there and it's already a known entity. It's already a known quantity. So I hope I answered that question. I know that's being very vague, and I don't mean to be vague in my answers, but that is one that's really hard to answer.
Matthew, and then also we have a question about, do we know any realtors in the Mountain City, Roan Mountain area that we could refer to someone?
You know, I would, I don't know any specific real estate agent. Where I would start with that is I would start with a whitetail type property. I've got a contact at Whitetail that I can share with you if need be, or I would maybe go online and look for like a National Land Realty or a Whitetail Properties or a company that specializes in land sales in that area. And that's where I would start. Rather than, and again, no disrespect to like a Keller Williams or a Coldwell Banker or a Berkshire Hathaway. But I would find a company that specializes in land sales in that area. And I would say that you can probably research it online and you can find results for that. But I would start with a National Land Realty or a Whitetail Properties. And if you need the contact name, the contact I have, I'm happy to share it with you. I'm happy to share it with you. He may not service or might not be his territory per se, but I can certainly give you his name and number and you can contact him directly. And I've got his card right here. So I'll spare everybody the time for putting his name and phone number out there. So just reach out to me or Dawn and I'll give it to you.
And then Matthew, we've got a question from Greg. He's asking the pros and cons of a construction loan versus buying the property and building the house separately. I'm not 100% sure if you're meaning I'm not sure if he's wanting to know the difference between a construction loan and a conventional loan. I mean, I would think maybe tell him how most of our clients end up doing their financing. Oh, he says buy the land first and then build later. Okay.
Yeah. So really, I'm going to answer the question, but I'm going to first qualify that by saying a lending institution would be the best person. Calling a Jen West at US Bank or a Catherine Greenfield at Rural First, they're going to be able to answer better those financial questions than I would be. I know enough to be dangerous just based on the hundreds of clients that I've worked with in the past 24 years. But I would say, again, like finding a piece of land, find a professional real estate agent that specializes in land. When you have questions about financing, call that lending institution and do that due diligence with them. But what I will tell you is that many of our clients, and it's a mixed bag because we get a little bit of everything. We get the clients that will own the property outright and they've owned this parcel of land for 50 years, or it's a family piece of property that they inherited, from their family, or they bought it 20 years ago with the intent one day when they retired to build this forever home or this legacy home for their family and for their kids and their grandkids. And they already own the property. We get a lot of that where property is already paid for. They're ready to build. They've already put infrastructure in. They've already invested the money and they have the equity in all the utilities already being there. And then we get those like the ones this week where everything's going to be financed. He's going to finance the land and the bank is going to pay for the property and he's going to make payments on that land. And then when he gets to the point that he's ready for putting it, well, he's already got infrastructure. When he gets to a point where he's ready to build a house, he's going to finance the construction loan and he's going to roll the land into that loan. And then he's going to end up putting that all together in a permanent mortgage. And these lending institutions have gotten creative. They've come up with these one-time closings where they can basically do a construction loan. They can do a one-time closing, lock in a rate. And then when you get that construction finished, they can roll all that into a permanent mortgage. And those lending institutions like US Bank and like Rural First can help you through those, and you can contact those. We've got those contacts available if you need them, but hopefully that answers that question.
Okay, Matthew, we have another question pertaining to budget. Monica has asked, she says, it's hard to make a land and land improvement budget without knowing the cost to build the home. Do we have a brochure that has estimated cost of, home models? So,
well, let me say the land and land improvement budget is different than the construction budget of the home. Those are all separated. You'll never find a general contractor that will give you a price or a ballpark cost per square foot that will include the land and the land improvements unless you're going into a development. And that's just not typically, where our clients are building. So you really want three separate budgets. You want an overall budget. Like I don't want to invest more than, again, picking random numbers. I don't want to invest more than 500K in this entire project. What I've got to do is back into that. I've got to back into that and say, okay, I want to build a 1,500 square foot house. And the national average of construction for a custom home last year was 175 to 225. So that's $200 a square foot. That puts me at, 300K for the home itself. Now I've got 200 that I can put into land and land improvements. And let's say we're going to, err on the high side and say, 50,000 for improvements. Now I've got 150 to play with on the land. Now I'm going to go look at properties that are all within a listing price range of 150 or below. And so that's kind of how you do it, is you look at your total investment goal or what you can comfortably afford to do, and then you back into it to see what's left over. At that point, you might have to do some trade-offs, or at that point, as you get into it, you might find that, hey, I don't need 50,000 for the improvement because I'm buying a property that already is improved. So now I can take that money and put it into my building budget, into that bucket, or I can put it into a better piece of land because this piece of land that I'm looking at already has the infrastructure in, it already has the utilities in. So I'm just going to move that money over. I'm going to rob Peter to pay Paul and move that money over into another bucket. So hopefully that helps. I know, again, it's an exercise sometimes in just spitballing numbers and ballparking, which can be, a little uncomfortable sometimes. But really, until you have a piece of property, until you know the topography of it and the infrastructure of it, and until you have a plan that's designed specifically for that piece of property with all the finishes and fixtures and all the options that you want into it, all the amenities that you want into it, and you go out to a GC and get all that estimated, that's really the only way to know a true, exact, or closer number is going to be. And so you kind of have to use I want to invest this much that's my maximum investment number, and then back into it and just separate that into, your land budget, your land improvement budget, and your building cost budget for the house.
And also, we did a lunch and learn on budgeting. So
Yes.
that's on our YouTube channel. We went in depth over budgeting
Yes.
and the worksheets and everything. And so if you didn't get to attend that one, and you want to watch that on our YouTube channel, send me an email and I can send you those handouts that were associated with that presentation.
Yeah, and if you want to listen to me ramble on for another 45 minutes, we need to talk about other things that you need to do in your free time. But no, I appreciate that, Dawn, because that is a good point. We did a budgeting. In fact, that was last month.
Mm-hmm.
We did a budgeting presentation that I think people got a lot of value out of.
Yeah, I think for right now, Matthew, I don't see any other questions or topics that we haven't covered. Let me see if we've got any new ones coming in. Okay, Julie, I'll get that to you for that. She just sent me a message to send her the presentation. Okay, Mike has asked, do we have a rep in the UP of Michigan, the upper part of Michigan, maybe?
Upper Peninsula.
Upper Peninsula. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with.
We actually have a home up there. Surprisingly, we actually built it. We stacked the shell in February before the freeze thaw, where basically, trucks can't go on the roads after a certain period of time, and everything was completely frozen over. We don't have a rep per se, like a dealer up there. We help clients here out of our national headquarters all over the country, because we're doing a limited portion. We're doing the log and timber portion, and then we can help connect you with either our homeowners up there or help you locate a general contractor up there. Or if you already have a GC, we can work and partner with them to get you through the process. But I don't have a dealer up there or a representative that lives in the UP. Too cold.
Yeah, so I think that's everything, Matthew. I'm just going through here, making sure. So I've got some people sending me their email addresses for last month's presentations. I'm going to get that sent to them.
Yeah, and it's also on the YouTube channel. You can actually go on there and find it. As we said, for anybody who wants to go back and listen to a portion of this or gets the handouts, Dawn will typically always send out the links to the presentation on the YouTube channel. It'll take her a couple of days. It's usually Monday or Tuesday before that goes out. So be patient with us. And then you'll get those handouts, and you'll get some of those resources and that YouTube link to, if you want to go back and listen to this presentation again, you can.
Yeah, so I think that's everything from everybody, Matthew. So
good. Hey, well, thank you all again so much for your time. Sorry we ran over a little bit. Hopefully this has been super helpful to you. Please reach out to your sales consultant if you have any other questions that didn't get answered, or if you need anything at all. Like I said, if there's anything that you've asked us for, please feel free to email Dawn. She can send it to whoever it pertains to, and we'll share whatever contacts we have for you to help you through the process. And we're here to partner with you through this process to help you through each step of the phase and through each step of the way, to help you get to your goals. So thank you all for your time.